What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If. If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my third channel, so if you want some more what ifs, go check out my other channels. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. Naruto grit his teeth as he looked up at the sky. Night had fallen, and he still wasn't even close to where his team had battled the mysterious Kunoichi. Even he had to admit traveling through this forest at night was a bad idea. The risk that he could get ambushed was high, and all sorts of predators would come out, not to mention Sasuke and Sakura would be in hiding. If they got away, any signs of where they went, or what happened to them, would be harder to see. It didn't help that the snake hadn't gone in a straight line. It looked like Naruto's luck hadn't held out. He'd lost the trail not too long ago. The darkness wouldn't help there either. His disguised clones hadn't sent back anything yet, either using his chakra to silence his footfalls as best he could. He continued searching. If he didn't find anything soon, he'd have to camp out alone for the night. He didn't want to, but wasting all his strength and getting himself lost wouldn't help. I hope you guys are okay out there. Anko struggled as she walked along the forest floor. She grit her teeth, hand reaching for her neck. The spot where that damned seal her former sensei had branded her with had reappeared. Pain pulsed through her entire body, spreading out from that mark, and it brought back bad memories. As she tried to make her way back to the village, she remembered the kind man her sensei had once been, or pretended to be. She wasn't sure. All she knew was the burning hatred she felt for him ever since they found out how far he'd sunk. Since he'd betrayed Konoha and her, it had taken years to restore the villagers' faith in her. She'd been damned in the eyes of most of the village by association. Many still suspected her of being a spy, and now he was here again, after that Uchiha kid, and who knew what else? Well, whatever he had in mind, his threat was clear: halt the exams or capture those 3 genin from the village he made, and he'd destroy Konoha from Orochimaru. That was no idle threat. She didn't know what he was planning. He had to have something in mind besides seducing the Uchiha heir to his side. One thing that was clear: if they did anything overt like declaring martial law, it would be trouble. She needed to warn Lord Hokage, but the pain was making getting through this forest a struggle. Good thing she'd spent so much time here. She just had to keep moving. Sakura replaced the wet towel on Sasuke's head and sat back, sighing as she looked out. She couldn't see the sky from here, but it was clear that night had fallen. Sasuke still showed no signs of recovery. His fever has not lessened in the slightest, and his face twisted in pain. It had been hours since their encounter with Orochimaru, and she was beginning to feel tired, but sleep wasn't an option. Sasuke's condition would change while she was sleeping. On top of that, there was what Orochimaru had said about his subordinates: they could attack at any moment, so she had no choice but to maintain her vigil. Please be okay, both of you. She wanted to go and find Naruto, but Sasuke depended on her right now. Minutes turned to more hours, and nothing changed. Sakura dutifully changed the wet towel on Sasuke's head whenever it got warm and looked out for any signs of attack, but there was never anything but darkness and the sounds of insects in the forest. Sakura could feel her eyelids growing heavy. She had no idea how much time had passed, but she guessed she'd been up for somewhere around 20 hours at this point. She felt her stomach grumble. They hadn't even had time to gather supplies. Still, she shook her head and forced herself to remain awake. She had no idea how long it had been, but eventually, she looked up and saw the rays of the sun shining through the forest canopy. It was morning. She had now been up for a full day. Still, she hoped that with the light of the sun, Naruto would find him soon. She had to believe in him. It was then that a rustle reached her ears. She jerked her head to look at the sound and found a squirrel. She sighed in relief. It was just a woodland critter, and a normal one too. Geez, I'm out of it. I almost let a squirrel of all things. Then she heard it start to scurry towards her and looked back at it. Her eyes hardened. She threw a shuriken at the critter and tossed it at the small animal. It had no time to avoid it. The weapon raked across its back, drawing a small amount of blood, but it was better off now. It wouldn't have to worry about that explosive seal on its back as the wounded critter scurried off. Sakura tensed and scanned her surroundings. The enemy was here, somewhere. Well, you noticed a vaguely familiar voice rang out. 3 figured leaped out of a tree at the edge of the clearing. It was the Oto Genin, Orochimaru's goons. Pretty sharp, but you seem a bit tired. Up all night? The bandaged one asked. And I don't see that blonde anywhere. Shame. I was hoping for some payback. Not like it matters. We've got a job to do. The one with spiky hair said. Looks like Sasuke's down for the count. Wake him up. We want to fight him. He then chuckled. Or don't. It won't make a difference in the end anyway. Sakura growled as she drew a kunai. What did the snake Sannin want? This doesn't make any sense. If he wanted to kill us, he had us dead to rights last night. Why send these clowns to finish the job? And that seal? She didn't have enough information, and she doubted Orochimaru would share his plans with Genin either way. It didn't change the task in front of her if you want Sasuke. You'll have to walk over my dead body, she ground out, glaring at the trio. Fine by me, the black-haired one said as he started to rise. Wait, Zaku, the bandaged one stopped him. Why, the now-named boy asked. You're not very good at this, are you? The one-eyed genin asked as he kneeled and placed a hand on the ground. A recently overturned stone. Differently colored dirt and grass shouldn't grow here. With that, he overturned a patch of false grass. Traps are only effective if they go unnoticed. The pink-haired girl grit her teeth, glaring at them. Idiot, Zaku scoffed. If you'd stood aside, we might have let you walk away, but if you want to try to stop us with such lackluster skills, then so be it. He tilted his head. Kill her. And with that, the sound genin burst into motion, leaping into the air and above her. Traps. And Sakura smirked. You're the idiot. She cut a hidden wire with her kunai. She guessed no one ever warned them that if you see an obvious trap, then it was a safe bet that it was covering up a better one. The three Oto genin looked up as a massive log swung down at them. Oh no, the bandaged one shouted. Just kidding. He put his gauntlet hand on it and made a hand seal. Immediately the log burst apart, splinters flying everywhere. Then she saw his eye widen as he noticed the explosive seals on the back of the log. Shit, he had just enough time to brace himself before the three were blown away by the blast. As the tags detonated, she cut another wire as she watched them crash into the ground. Kunai rained down on them from above, and the trio jumped back to dodge, only to find they weren't the real threat. A series of paper bombs fell from above, bursting into purple smoke. Poison. Zakadosu yelled from within the cloud. Slicing sound wave. The spiky-haired boy unleashed a wave of wind from his palms that blew away the cloud. Dosu-kin, are you alright? I held my breath, the girl replied. Same, Dosu responded. It was then that they noticed the rock wall that now stood before the massive roots. Is she trying to hide? Zaku asked. Wait, Dosu said, holding up a hand to his teammate. He closed his eye for a moment before it, and those of his teammates widened. They all jumped back just before Sakura burst from the ground beneath Dosu. She threw a volley of Senbon his way, only for him to block them with his gauntlet. She clicked her teeth in frustration. She saw Zaku raise his arm, revealing holes in his palm, but she dived back underground before he could attack. She sensed them land above her and took a moment to think. They'd reacted faster than she expected. Deciding to test things out, she made to attack them again. Upon sensing them moving above, she dove further underground and slipped away. So they can sense me, even underground? How? No, that doesn't matter. What matters is, I can't ambush them, and I don't know what kind of jutsu they use besides that wind attack. She frowned as she remembered the holes she spied in the boy's palms. He let someone drill holes through his arms so he can use what's basically a wind jutsu, and he calls me an idiot. She took a moment to think about all she knew about these three before settling on a plan. She burst from the ground in front of them and found Zaku's palms pointed at her, just as she expected. Nice trick, but not good enough. Slicing sound wave. The air distorted as airwaves burst from the boy's palms, speeding towards her. It struck her head on, but she burst into smoke on impact, revealing a log substitution. Zaku didn't sound the least bit impressed as he turned to her. Sakura dropped down, running through hand seals as she saw Kin charge toward her. Earth-style, earth flow spears. Stone spikes erupted from the ground. They began to fill the battlefield, moving ever closer to the Oto genin. The three jumped into the air to avoid being skewered, just as Sakura had hoped. As she made another hand sign, two sealed tags Naruto had drawn up for her became visible on the tree behind them. Just a few of those she'd laid down immediately. Dozens of kunai and shuriken shot from the seals and flew down towards the genin. Zaku turned his arms toward the weapons and blasted them away, but that left him open, channeling chakra to her legs. Sakura launched herself at the boy as she drew two kunai. He noticed her coming at the last second, but didn't have enough time to use that jutsu and brought his arms down to defend. He blocked his chest and protected his vitals, but Sakura managed to nail one of her secondary targets. The boy cried out as the kunai stabbed into his left arm and right shoulder. Zakadosu yelled as Sakura kicked him in the chest and sent him flying to the tree, slamming into the bark and splintering it as she threw poison Senbon his way. Dosu appeared in front of him and blocked the weapon with his gauntlet as Zaku landed on the ground, his right arm hanging limp at his side, the tendons severed. You're not very good at this, are you? Sakura threw back at them as Zaku grit his teeth and glared at her. She wasn't sure what that gauntlet did, but it probably had something to do with the force that destroyed that log. Dosu fought at close range, Zaku covered distance, but she didn't know what Kin's part was. Still, next time, don't show off your trump cards at the start of a fight. She ducked down as she sensed something flying towards her, two Senbon flying over her head. She turned to look at their source, the black-haired Kunoichi, and made to move before a ringing reached her ears. She turned to see bells on the Senbon. The distraction was just long enough for Zaku to fire off an air pressure attack with his left arm. It slammed into her and sent her flying, crashing into her root and coughing up blood when she started to rise. Her body suddenly locked up, all of the muscles in her arms and legs tensed and refused to obey, Hakin said. And Sakura looked at her face being about the only thing still somewhat under her control, who said, "We showed off all-out trump cards genjutsu, a sound-based one." Sakura guessed not good. Those were the worst kind, short of Kekkai Genkai related ones. She turned to see Dosu charge at her. She bit her lip hard enough to draw blood, the pain shattering the illusion and allowing her to move. She kicked back to dodge, but a moment later, the world twisted once again. Her body refused to obey. She fell and slid across the dirt, crashing into the base of one of her spikes as she tried to rise. It felt to her like everything was shifting, as if she was on a ship at sea in a storm. Her stomach began to turn, nausea rolling through her. "This is my equilibrium shot." How she felt something warm trickle down from her ears. Looking beneath her, she found drops of red staining the dirt. "Blood. Pretty good, girlie. It looks like we underestimated you. But it's over now." "This is another sound attack?" she asked. "That's right." The bandaged genin held up his gauntlet. "Thanks to this gauntlet of mine, I can manipulate sound waves. I attack the membranes of your inner ear. I'm afraid you won't be able to move as you like for a while." Damn it, Sakura had thought that if she could take Saku out and keep her distance from the other two, she could handle this. "No, I can't let them down like this." "That's Sakura. When did she?" Ino had wondered as she stared into the clearing with wide eyes. "We should get out of here. Those three are out of our league," Choji said beside her, fear almost palpable on her other side. Shikamaru turned to her. "Ino, what are you going to do?" How the blonde turned to him, her eyes still wide with shock. "You guys used to be friends, right? Are you just going to sit here and watch?" Shikamaru asked, as lazy as he usually was. He was surprisingly dependable when the chips were down. She bit her lip as she stared back into the clearing. How had things turned out like this? After getting nothing on the first day, she'd had the, in her humble opinion, brilliant idea of scouting out the area by using her mind transfer jutsu on a bird. It worked swimmingly. If only all the teams she found didn't look tougher than them. Not that that was saying much. None of Ino's team would deny that. And then she spied Sakura, caring for Sasuke, who didn't look well. No sign of Naruto. How did that even happen? Sakura and Naruto, sure, but Sasuke, she thought anyway. It was low, but Shikamaru thought they were their best bet, and this was what they'd stumbled into when they got here. "TCH, you gave us a lot more trouble than I thought," they heard the Oto Kunoichi say as she walked over to Sakura, who was fighting to stand up. "Let's make this hurt, Dosu. Go and get Sasuke. Let's kill him in front of her." Ino's expression shifted to horror at that. "Good idea," Dosu said as she began to walk towards the stone barrier Sakura had made, while their spiky-haired teammate smirked while holding his wounded shoulder. Sakura immediately launched herself at the Oto Kunoichi with her fist cocked back for a punch. Before she gritted her teeth and stumbled, her opponent easily sidestepped her attack and kneed her in the stomach, sending her to the ground shakily. She still tried to stand back up. "I won't let you." "When did Sakura get that strong?" Ino wondered as she stared into the clearing with wide eyes. "Not just in terms of fighting ability, though that was obvious." Ino remembered back when they first met, Sakura had been curled up in a ball, crying her eyes out after being teased by other kids. She remembered how shy she was when she introduced her to her other friends. The Sakura she knew would be frozen, trembling, tearing up as she could do nothing but watch, just like her now. Ino watched Sakura run for Dosu, only for the girl to jump in her way. She tried to throw a punch at her, but she was slow and off balance. The Oto Kunoichi moved into her guard and struck the pink-haired girl in the face, sending her back to the ground. Ino's hands balled into fists, shaking at her side. She remembered the day Sakura ended their friendship, the day she asked Ino if she liked Sasuke too, before telling her they were rivals from now on. And that day a few weeks ago. Flashback. Ino sat at the counter of her family's flower shop, sighing as she looked up at the clock and then turned her gaze to the ceiling. She enjoyed tending her clan's shop, but it was a slow day, and her other duties had already been complete. Nothing left to do but hope someone showed up and wait out the clock. Still, it's not like there were worse places for it. Surrounded by beautiful and fragrant flowers, she smiled as she thought this was one job Shikamaru might enjoy. Lazy stick in the mud that he was. Then she heard the door open. She looked over, and her eyes widened before they narrowed. It was Sakura. She hadn't set foot in this shop for years. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Ino said, resting her head on her hand. "What brings you here?" Billboard brow. Sakura twitched at that, briefly glaring at her before taking a deep breath. "I'm here to order some flowers." "Of course," Sakura said, though her words didn't have the same bite they usually did when they talked. "And this is probably the only place in the village I could get them," she said as she walked over to the desk and handed her a list. Ino wasn't about to turn down a customer. Even her rival, her father, would chew her out. She raised a brow as she looked at the list. Every one of these was poisonous. "Well, it's pretty obvious." what she wants with these, and she was right. They were the only flower shop in Konoha who'd have access to all of these. Yeah, I'll handle it. We should have the order ready for you in a week, Ino said while she opened a drawer and slipped the paper inside. She closed her eyes and made a shooing motion. If that's all, then you can take that oversized forehead and leave. She expected fire from her rival, as usual, but instead, there was only silence when Ino opened her eyes and looked. She found Sakura seemed uncertain. Well, that was one reason I came here, the pink-haired girl said, averting her gaze for a moment before steeling herself and meeting Ino's eyes. Besides that, I wanted to say I'm sorry. How were you talking about for starting this? Sakura said with a sweeping gesture between them. I'm sorry for what I did that day, for walking away and making us rivals. Ino closed her eyes and turned her head. TCH, where'd this come from all of a sudden? Think you can get me to drop my guard that easily? No, I just what, like you said, you're the one who walked away. And now you suddenly come in here and say I'm sorry after we've been at each other's throats for years. Why should I believe you? Ino then smirked. Then again, this is just the kind of ploy I'd expect from you. Forehead, your head might be inflated with all that knowledge that got you through the academy, but you don't have an ounce of wisdom to go with it. That got Sakura growling, and she brought up a shaking fist. Yeah, well, at least I have a brain. You porker, you've got nothing but beauty tips in that empty head of yours. Well, at least my efforts pay off. Ugly, so you admit you're a dumb blonde? They glared, sparks shooting between their eyes. Then Sakura shook her head. Damn it, I didn't come here for this, she said under her breath before she walked out. That's right, get lost, Ino said as she set her head back down in her hand. Ino, Sakura got her attention as she stood at the door. For what it's worth, I did mean it when I said I was sorry. She walked out before the blonde could reply. End of flashback. Ino's face twisted as she watched Sakura try to get back up. Ino, Shikamaru said quietly but harshly, she needed to make a decision. We need to go. Choji almost pleaded with his teammates. Ino trembled as she fought with herself, trying to decide what to do as she clenched her jaw. Then it all became clear. She couldn't let Sakura or Sasuke die, and she couldn't let her rival show her up. Shikamaru, Ino began, I'm going to use my mind transfer jutsu on that girl. Her genjutsu could take us all out if we give her the chance to use it. Choji looked panicked, but Shikamaru nodded. Got it, that guy with the gauntlets mine. Then you guys can't be serious. Hey, it's not so bad. That leaves the wounded guy for you. He's already an arm down. You got the easy bit, Shikamaru reassured Choji, who shook his head. Ino was already forming a circle with her hands, looking through them at the brunette. Mind transfer jutsu. She blacked out, and for a few moments, she knew nothing. Then she opened the Oto Kunoichi's eyes, her eyes for the moment, and looked down at Sakura, who was on her side, fighting to stand. She smirked as she reached into Kin's pouch, feeling around and plucking out Senbon. Looks like you bit off more than you could chew. Forehead. Sakura's eyes widened. Ino threw the Senbon at Dosu, who immediately noticed and blocked them. What the hell? Kinzaku asked. What do you think? Your ugh. Dosu's body suddenly seized. Dosuzaku turned to his bandaged teammate. My body, it's moving on its own. What is this? Dosu said as he stood and took on an odd stance with his hands over his head. Fingers pointed to his scalp. What, my shadow? He looked down and noticed a shadow connected to his own, leading to the tree line. He then made a pushing motion, mirroring Shikamaru as he forced Choji out of the bushes and into the clearing. Ugh. What kind of weird jutsu are these, and who the hell is that fat ass? Saku growled. Choji jerked at those words as Ino grinned. Ooh, that was a mistake. Choji stood up and glared at the Oto Genin. Fat ass, did I hear that right? He asked in a deadly calm. Then he looked at the spiky-haired boy in rage. I'm not fat, I'm just big boned, he growled before throwing his arms into the air. Chubby's rule? What? Zaku asked, looking torn between confusion and frustration. Choji then used one of his clan's signature jutsu. His body suddenly expanded into a massive sphere. His head and extremities pulled in like a turtle's before he began to roll at Zaku. Human boulder. TCH. Zaku pointed his left arm at him and unleashed a wave of compressed air, but it only slowed Choji down. Ino, Sakura asked from her place on the ground. Took you long enough, Ino answered back. How? It's one of my clan's special jutsu. She then smirked at Sakura. Hope you don't mind, I couldn't let you be the only one to look good in front of Sasuke. Sakura smiled back. Choji and Zaku's techniques struggled with each other for a bit before the air pressure slipped under Choji and sent him flying into the air, crashing down on where Zaku stood. Seeing this, Sakura tried to stand. Sakura, that's enough, she said, drawing her attention. Let us handle this. Ino, Sakura said, struggling with gritted teeth. Listen, these guys, they aren't here to take these exams. They're here to kill Sasuke. Ino's eyes widened at that before she glared at the one remaining genin over my dead body. Choji had returned to normal, dazed by his short trip through the air. If this is a mission, I take it they're not going to leave if I threaten this girl. Considering who gave them the order, I doubt they'd even care, Sakura answered, drawing a brief look of confusion from Ino before she focused on her enemies. Not good. Holding this girl hostage was her trump card. Shikamaru could only maintain control over someone for a short amount of time. It wouldn't be long before his jutsu broke, and she doubted he'd fall for that twice. Her jutsu wouldn't last that long either. For that matter, maybe she should have practiced it more. Okay then, the only option she had was to take out Dosu before Shikamaru's jutsu ran out. At least then, they'd only have two enemies to fight. She drew more Senbon and ran at Dosu, only for Zaku to point his palm at her, unleashing a wave of wind that slammed into her and sent her into a tree. Ino, she heard Sakura, Shikamaru and Choji cry, "Ugh, bastards." They didn't even hesitate, Ino thought as she fought against the pain and rose to her feet. "Now, for you," Zaku said, pointing at where the shadow was coming from. "Crap, Shikamaru and her body you should have just stayed out of." Before he could finish, a familiar orange blur appeared and kicked him in the head, sending him and crashing into the ground. Standing there, glaring down at him, was Naruto. Sakura yelled, sounding happy and relieved to see her teammate. Naruto looked at her, his eyes widened when he saw how bloodied she was before he glared at Zaku. "Looks like you've had a hard time. Sorry I didn't get back sooner." He looked from one Oto genin to another. "Don't worry, I'll take care of these guys in 5 seconds." It was at that moment that Ino's mind transfer jutsu ended. There was a rush, and in a moment, she found herself back in her own body. Her eyes flew open as she went on full alert, peering over the bushes. "Oh yeah, big talk. Let's see you back it up," Zaku said as he pointed his palm at Naruto. Shikamaru's shadow possession broke at that moment too. Dosu immediately noticed his body was free and shot at Naruto. "Oh, no," she thought as Sakura yelled, "Naruto, don't!" Naruto dodged Dosu's attack and immediately grimaced. Dosu's bandages shifted, showing he was grinning. "Too bad, it's already." And then Naruto burst into smoke. What he had just enough time to exclaim his shock before another Naruto appeared in front of him and slammed a fist into his gut. Was that a clone technique? A solid one, since one could Naruto use any clone jutsu. Zaku gritted his teeth, preparing to attack, when suddenly the wind shifted and formed tornadoes that came barreling down on him. He raised his palm and blew them away with an intense wind blast, but 3 more Narutos were on him in that instant, and with one arm down, he was wide open. The first clone clocked him in the face, the second an uppercut into the solar plexus, causing him to double over. The third kicked him square in the jaw, driving him into the air. 2 more kicks sent him higher before one grabbed his ankles. It spun around to build momentum before slamming him into the ground with enough force to crack the ground, kicking up a dust cloud. While the 3 doppelgangers were pounding on Zaku, the Naruto fighting Dosu reached into his pouch and took out 2 necklaces of prayer beads. He tossed them at the bandaged genin and made a hand sign. The objects seemed to take on a life of their own. They wrapped around his arms like snakes. Sealing jutsu, weighted seal. Dosu fell with a cry of shock, crashing into the ground and creating a crater. When the dust cleared, Zaku was knocked out cold while both of Dosu's arms were half buried in the ground. They could hear him struggle as he tried and failed to lift them. Kin roused herself and drew Senbon, only for another Naruto to put a kunai to her throat. "Don't even think about it." What Sakura, are you okay?" Naruto, the real one, she assumed, ran over to Sakura and kneeled in front of her. Sakura nodded, smiling with relief. "Yeah, that bandaged guy just hit me with that technique of his. My equilibrium's screwed up. What about you? I was so worried about you." "I'm fine, Sakura. You know it would take more than that to keep me down." He looked at the fallen Oto genin, stopping on the wounds on Zaku. "Did you hold all 3 of them off by yourself until these guys showed?" "Yeah." Sakura seemed a bit down. "Sorry, I couldn't take them alone." "What are you talking about? It was 3-on-1, and you almost took that guy out by yourself." "Hell, I only had such an easy time because my clone let me know what was going on, so I came ready to blindside them," Naruto said, putting a hand on her shoulder, and she smiled again. Ino could only gape at what had just happened. Choji and Shikamaru looked as incredulous as her. "You did great, Sakura." "Okay." What Sakura's strength had shocked her, but what was that? Since when did Naruto, the class clown, the dead last, the kid whose only claims to fame were pranks and almost knocking out their sensei with a perverted jutsu, kick ass like that? And since when did these two get along? Sure, Sakura didn't hit him back when the genin gathered for the first test, but that was in front of all their rivals. The last time she saw them, Sakura would yell at Naruto every chance she got. If he was lucky, hit him. If he wasn't, what happened to this team? You saw all that too, right? Shikamaru asked beside her. Ino's face twisted into a furious glare. She was about to explode with questions when Naruto's next words stopped her short. "What happened to Sasuke? Is he alright?" It was a good thing he'd thought of that trick with his clones and the transformation jutsu. One of them had found Sakura around the time the Oto genin revealed themselves. Knowing it wouldn't make much of a difference since it couldn't take a hit, it dispersed to let him know she was in trouble. Thanks to that, he'd come in ready to blitz those 3 after His first clone took a dive and caught them off guard. He'd made sure to take them down before they could regain their balance. He'd gone a bit overkill. There were still a few clones waiting in the wings in case things went wrong. That was one of Kakashi's lessons. A good shinobi tries to end a battle before it begins whenever they have the chance, or get as close to it as they can with their opening move. Sasuke's over there, Sakura answered, looking over at the stone barricade. He's been out for hours. He looks like he's in pain. She then turned to him and looked afraid. Naruto, that kunoichi we were fighting, it was Orochimaru. Wait, what did she say? What he heard his reaction echoed from Ino's team. The two conscious members of the Odo team looked shocked at that. Wait, what are you saying? Orochimaru here? What's going on? Ino burst out of the bushes as Shikamaru followed warily. Now that he knew how deep in it they were, he couldn't lie. He was feeling about the same, knowing who they'd been fighting last night. Yesterday, after the exam started, we got off to a good start. Naruto had his clones scout out the area when suddenly they all got destroyed at once after one of them saw that creepy Kunoichi with the long tongue. Sakura began to explain. We knew she was bad news, so we ran, but it didn't take her long to catch us. We threw everything we had at her, and nothing worked. Damn, no wonder we couldn't touch her, Naruto said, cursing under his breath. He nailed me with a wind jutsu and then summoned a snake and had it drag me away from the fight. The damn thing was fast. By the time I snapped out of it, I was in a different part of the forest. I couldn't find my way back before nightfall, so I had to camp out in a tree by myself. He told Sasuke and me who he was after that. He said he wanted us to pass this stage, and then he put some weird seal on Sasuke. She then glared at the Odo Genin, and he said he was going to send these three bozos after us. They said Orochimaru ordered them to kill Sasuke. Naruto's eyes narrowed. That doesn't make any sense. And what's this about a seal? Well, Sakura, a familiar voice interrupted them from the barricade. They all looked up. Sakura began, only to stop cold. Everyone in the clearing stared, eyes wide with shock or fear. Something was very wrong with their teammate. It was clear what seal she was talking about now. Black flame-like markings covered the left half of Sasuke's face and his arm. A tornado of purple colored chakra swirled around him. His eyes had already shifted into the crimson of the Sharingan. There was a coldness in those eyes that they'd never seen before. Those eyes scanned the clearing, stopping on each of the Odo Genin. He scoffed. I see. I was going to ask who hurt you, but it looks like Naruto's already handled things, and I'd been hoping to try out this power. Sasuke, that seal, Sakura said. Sasuke looked down at his arm, covered in the seal markings. Oh, this, don't worry about it. I feel great. In fact, I'm overflowing with power right now. He clenched his fist. Then he looked to Naruto and smirked. Say, Naruto, since you've already taken care of these chumps, want to spar? You've always been trying to prove you're better than me, right? Want to press your luck? Yep. This wasn't Sasuke. While he and Sasuke might like to compete, he'd never pick an actual fight on a mission or in a situation like this. Not to mention that from that look in his tone, he wasn't planning on stopping until one of them couldn't get up if their life depended on it. The blonde then plastered a smile on his face and placed his hands behind his head. You know me, I'm always ready to throw down good. But Naruto interrupted, becoming serious again. Not while you're letting that thing control you. He glared. Wake up, Sasuke. I don't care if that thing came from Orochimaru. You're stronger than that. Sasuke seemed unmoved. The curse mark spread further, now covering his whole face. This is strength, Sasuke. Listen to him, Sakura yelled, struggling to her feet. Naruto reached out to support her, seeing how unsteady she was. This isn't you. You think so? I told you, I'm an Avenger. Sasuke began, then he frowned and looked down at his hand. Suddenly, he let out a cry of pain and grasped his head as he stumbled back. The mark glowed an angry crimson and then receded to the back of his neck as the Uchiha heir fell to his knees. Sasuke, his teammates yelled as they ran to him. Kneeling in front of him, Sasuke looked up, his eyes returning to their usual cold color. What happened? Naruto and Sakura looked at each other. You don't remember? The pink-haired girl asked. The last thing I remember is Orochimaru. He grasped the spot on his neck where the seal was. Naruto, could you take a look at it? Sakura asked. You're the only one of us who knows anything about sealing jutsu. Naruto blinked. I can look, but I mean, I've only been at it for a little over a month. If this thing came from Orochimaru, it's probably way beyond my level. He took a spot beside Sasuke and gazed intensely at the mark on the Uchiha's next. He frowned deeply. This was, I can't make heads or tails of this thing. It's not like any of the seals I've studied, I can say that much, but that's about it. Sakura sighed. Well, let's look at what it did then. It gave Sasuke a power boost. Why power boost? Sasuke asked. Well, that proved he didn't remember what just happened. Yeah, and from the looks of it, it gave you a real mean streak too, Naruto said before cupping his chin. Maybe that's the point. It gives you power while twisting you into someone like Orochimaru. In that case, it's probably addictive too. It's gotta make sure you keep coming back for more once you realize it's bad news, right? Oh, I get it now, Sakura said, looking like she had had an epiphany before turning to the Oto Genin. That's what these guys were sent here for, all eyes. Turned to her, Orochimaru said we'd have to defeat his men. These guys, she looked at the Oto Genin, and they said they'd been sent here for Sasuke. That didn't make sense. If Orochimaru wanted us dead, why didn't he kill us himself? Why put that mark on Sasuke? But if it gives him power, if it's supposed to get him addicted and change him, in other words, these losers weren't supposed to kill me, they were supposed to get their asses kicked by me, but you guys beat me to the punch. Sasuke finished. That's about what I thought when I saw that mark, Dosu admitted begrudgingly. Dosu-kin yelled, scandalized Kin. Look at me honestly, tell me you can think of any other scenario why else Lord Orochimaru would send us here with orders to kill Sasuke, but then go ahead of us and place one of his curse marks on him. Dosu shot back. Kin looked surprised and seemed to think for a moment, then a look of realization came over her. She looked away into the ground. Chances are, that's why he sent Naruto away. To Sakura pointed out, cupping her chin. He said he wanted us to pass this stage. He was probably afraid you and I could take them together but couldn't risk crippling you and making us fail. Wait for a second, you think these exams are still going to go on? Orochimaru is in the village, Ino yelled. Dosu chuckled. You think they don't already know? They all looked at him, most glaring. Think about it, Lord. Oh no. Orochimaru killed some genin to infiltrate this forest. Do you think they haven't already found out? And yet, here we still are. My guess is Orochimaru has some leverage to force them to keep going. I hate to say it, but he's probably right. Shikamaru spoke up, cupping his chin. If it's Orochimaru we're talking about and he does have some leverage on them, they'll probably play along, prepare for the worst while hoping this is all he had planned. Speaking of, Dosu spoke up again. Let us go, and I'll give you our scroll. What, after everything you pulled, you think we'll just let you leave? Ino yelled. Dosu tilted his head from his place on the ground. What else are you going to do? Kill us? You got the stomach for that? He asked, and Ino wilted. Besides, we know the truth now. We aren't assassins. We were sacrificial lambs, and your partners were enough to beat us. Sasuke, even if we could beat the three of you at once, you could always draw upon that curse mark's power. Then there'd be no hope for us. There was silence as they contemplated their enemy's words. He had a few points. Naruto glared. What else do you know about this curse mark? Nothing, Dosu replied, surprised. We're genin, and we were completely in the dark about Orochimaru's true intentions. I know of the curse mark, everyone in Oto does, but the specifics are above my rank. All I can tell you is that he places them on most of his experiments, and anyone who catches his eye, that Sasuke must be one tough customer, because most of the people he puts them on die from the strain. Naruto glared for a moment, though he had to admit he felt a bit sorry for these guys from the look on Kin's face. They'd been loyal to Orochimaru, and this was how he repaid them. If he was right before, then taking them in would probably just piss off Orochimaru, and they probably wouldn't get any intel. As he said, they were just genin. If not, the Jonin would probably pick them up later, and Naruto didn't want to kill them. They'd just learned their leader had betrayed them and that they'd come after them on a lie, and they'd already beaten them pretty hard once. They didn't have a reason to attack them again besides payback. Alright, no funny business. He made a hand sign, releasing his jutsu and causing the prayer beads to loosen, allowing Dosu to slip them off. He rubbed his arms for a moment, then reached into his raincoat and pulled out an earth scroll. He walked over to Zaku and picked him up, at which point Naruto took the kunai away from Kin's neck. She quickly rejoined her teammate. The two left without another word. Ino was kind of numb from everything that had hit her over the last few minutes. She stood there and watched as the clone that had held Kin at knife point picked up the scroll. So, guess that means we've got both scrolls, Naruto said, breaking the silence. Afraid not. Orochimaru burned ours, Sasuke informed him. What? Oh, well, that's just great on top of everything else. Naruto growled and crossed his arms. He then looked to her team and smiled. Thanks for the help. By the way, we owe you one. Well, it's not like we could just stand by and watch Sakura and Sasuke get killed. Shikamaru replied. It struck her how much they'd changed in just a few months. Sakura had gotten so much stronger, and she knew that before. She hadn't been much braver than Ino herself yet. She hadn't shown an ounce of fear when the Oto Genin had attacked. Even outnumbered, she'd been nothing but determined to protect her team. Naruto was still the same in a lot of ways, still a loudmouth, craving for attention, but now he could actually back up his boasts, and he didn't seem to be the idiot he was. Back in the academy, he knew what he was talking about. Now he could be serious when he needed to, and she couldn't deny that he had made an entrance, and Sasuke used to brush off Sakura, and he and Naruto used to be at each other's throats, not to mention how Sakura used to act towards the other blonde when she found out that Sasuke, the cool loner, was on a team with his loudmouth wannabe rival and a girl weaker than her who had a massive crush on him. She thought it was going to go down in flames. Instead, they'd all flourished and bonded well. Ino hadn't seen Sasuke in action, but she assumed he had improved just as much after all. It was Sasuke. What had happened to these three and freaking Orochimaru in the village in their Chunin exams? He'd been there when they gathered for the first exam, and before they entered the forest she'd been standing a few yards away from the worst traitor to Konoha since Madara, Uchiha, and he was targeting Sasuke. Then there was that market's evil Chakra, and what it did Sasuke Ino, Sakura said, drawing her out of her thoughts. Can I talk to you in private? Still in a bit of a daze, Ino replied. Sure. She watched as Sakura stood still, unsteady on her feet. The blonde stood beside her old friend and let her lean on her. They walked out of the clearing and stopped once they felt they were out of hearing distance. Sakura leaned against a tree and slid down to the forest floor. All right, talk. Sakura was silent for a moment before she said, I'm not sure where to start. Ino sighed and crossed her arms. What happened to you three? You and Naruto are so different from when we graduated. Well, I guess it all began with a mission to the land of waves. Sakura began from there. Sakura described just what had happened, the state of wave and the actions of Gato. Much to Ino's disgust, their first encounter with enemy ninja and learning the full scope of what they were facing, the battle with a Jonin as strong as their sensei, and how Naruto and Sasuke had saved the day, how bad things were in wave and how it ended. Sakura had told her about what the masked boy had done to Sasuke in advance, but Ino's blood still ran cold when Sakura described finding him motionless. She noticed Sakura left some things out, like just how the masked boy died, but she got most of the story and she could see how all that would change them. And I didn't do anything. I couldn't. Sure, I guarded Tazuna, but any one of those guys would have torn through me in about 5 seconds, Sakura said. Looking down at the ground, I did a lot of thinking after that, and I realized how stupid I'd been. She paused for a moment before she smiled ruefully. Honestly, I hated myself. Sakura Ino wasn't sure how to respond, but more and more, she understood that Sakura had been completely honest that day in the shop for putting in so little effort in training and getting stronger when I'd have people relying on me, for treating Naruto like I did without realizing he acted that way because he was alone in the world, and for how I ended things with you. She looked up at Ino with a sad and honest expression. You did so much for me. You saved me from bullies, helped me find confidence, introduced me to people when I'd been alone, gave me something to strive towards, and I just cast you aside as soon as I found out we liked the same guy. She gave another rueful smile. I used to call Naruto an idiot, but he'd never turn his back on a friend like I did. She looked at Ino with determination. So I'm sorry. I understand if you don't forgive me, but I'll keep saying it as many times as it takes. What was she supposed to say to that? All the memories from their friendship passed through her mind. Her pep talks, tending to flowers together, hanging out with her other friends at school, all those good times that ended when Sakura decided they were love rivals. Her vision blurred a bit as she stared at her friend turned rival at once. She knew how she felt and how to respond. She kneeled to Sakura's level and wrapped her arms around her. Ino, geez, Sakura, you're making it hard to stay mad at you, Ino said. And she felt Sakura's arms wrap around her. They held that for a moment before she pulled back. But don't think this means I'm going to let you take Sasuke. Forehead wouldn't dream of it, Miss Piggy. There was no fire in their words, and both wore smiles on their faces. Kin sighed before looking to Dosu, who stood with his back to her. They'd left Zaku in a clearing not too far away, but far enough that he wouldn't hear anything if he regained consciousness. They wanted to include him, but both agreed he was a bit too loyal to their leader. Everything had gone so wrong. Kin's team had come here thinking Orochimaru had trusted them with an important task. They believed that he valued them. They thought that they were the best of the best, barring the likes of Orochimaru's Sound 4, and now they knew it was all a lie. Orochimaru had sent them to get slaughtered. The pink-haired girl and the blonde probably would have taken all three of them if they'd been together, and suddenly, they realized just where they truly stood. What are we going to do? Kin asked. The confidence, no arrogance, she once had was gone. Dosu looked off into the distance for a moment. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to make it to the next round and fight Sasuke and kill him. What? Why? Kin asked, perplexed by her teammates' words. The mission was a lie. Why bother going on with it to teach Orochimaru that I'm nobody's pawn? Dosu answered. He wanted us to fall to Sasuke, so I'm going to take his newest chosen pawn from him. I'll show him I'm not some weakling he can cast aside. Dosu, that's stupid, Kin argued, and he half turned to face her with his one eye. Even if you could win, I can only think of one reason Orochimaru would go through all this trouble for one guy. He must want his bloodline. She frowned. What's he going to do to you if you knowingly take that from him? She could tell from how the bandages shifted. Dosu was grimacing before he shook his head. You're right. I let my desire for vengeance cloud my judgment. Survival should be our main priority. Kin nodded in agreement. Our first option is to keep working for Orochimaru. She then scoffed. Working for someone who already tried to throw us away? That's a death sentence, if I ever heard one. Dosu hummed an affirmative and nodded. After a few moments of thought, the bandaged genin said, We could go to the third Hokage and plead our case. The shinobi here are soft, and that means he might be too, of course. Being genin, we have nothing to offer him nor any way to convince him of our sincerity. He then held up 3 fingers. Option 3 is the same, but we spy on Orochimaru's forces until we have something to give him. Hell no, spying on Orochimaru, that could only end with a one-way ticket to one of his labs. She sighed. So, what else is there? Run away and hope that his forces don't find us before we find another village to join. If we can find another village willing to let us, seems like it. Dosu replied. There was a moment of silence as both contemplated their options before Kin broke it. We're fucked. Aren't we? Very much so. Time skip. Sasuke sighed as he looked at his teammates as they sat together. He could still hardly believe they'd just come face to face with an S-ranked criminal, an enemy in the same league as him. It was a reminder of just how far he still had to go, but that wasn't the concern at the moment. Sasuke's teammates did not look well now that the adrenaline had worn off. It was clear how rough a time they'd had while he'd been out cold. Sakura's eyelids were drooping at times, one of her eyes would be half closed, and she was still shaky on her feet. Naruto was better off, but even then, there was a weariness about him, far from the norm for the exuberant blonde. I hate to say it, but I think we should take the day off from the test, Sasuke told them, drawing shock from his teammates. What? But Sasuke, we only have 4 days left and we don't even know how many heaven scrolls are still out there, Sakura replied, now sitting up on full alert. Sakura, you had to keep watch while I was out. You've been up for over 24 hours now and you haven't fully recovered from that sound attack. You think you're in the best condition to fight, Sasuke pointed out. He then turned to Naruto, and Naruto had to camp out by himself with all the predators and enemies out there. He would have had to sleep with one eye open. Yeah, Naruto added with a grimace, rubbing the back of his head. He has a point also. Have either of you eaten since breakfast yesterday? I know I haven't. As if on cue, a rumble rang out from Sakura's stomach. The pink-haired girl put a hand to her belly and blushed. Sasuke shook his head. Yeah, that's what I thought. So, we rest and recuperate for today, then pick things up tomorrow with Naruto's shadow clones. It shouldn't be too hard to find another team, at least now that Orochimaru's not around to destroy them. Guess we have no choice. Sakura slumped slightly, and with that admission, her eyes fell half shut. It seemed like she wasn't trying to fight her exhaustion anymore. All right, I'll have my clones scout out a place to hang out heads today, Naruto said, putting a fist to his chest. We cook whatever we catch here, then head out. Sasuke nodded. Hopefully, we can get it done before someone or something follows the smoke. He then stood up. I'll get us something to eat. Out of the 3 of us, I'm in the best condition. My clones will bring back any berries or whatever that they find, Naruto added. I've been studying local flora. I should be able to tell if any of it's poisonous. Sakura threw in. Naruto pointed off into the forest. There's a stream about 40 yards that way if you think you can round up some fish. Sasuke nodded. Naruto's clones were extremely useful. All right, I'll be back in half an hour, he said before he walked off, then leaped into the trees in a burst of speed. It didn't take long before he found the stream Naruto had mentioned standing at its shifting waters. He brought a hand to the mark on the nape of his neck and grimaced. The pain had mostly subsided. All that remained was a dull throbbing. He remembered what Naruto said. This thing was probably supposed to get him addicted to its power. He suddenly had a bad feeling about something. He called upon the Sharingan, but as his eyes bled crimson, the dull ache became a burning, stabbing pain that shot through his whole body. He let out a strangled cry as he doubled over, gripping the mark with both hands. Great, this thing was going to try to force Sasuke to use it. That's just great. He stood there for a few moments, taking in heavy breaths as he waited for the pain to subside. When it was over, he took on a taijutsu stance and ran through a kata. Taijutsu didn't set it off. He thought as much, given how he was able to make it here in the first place though. Even that might trigger it if he did anything too intensive. Still, he had taijutsu, his skill, and the seals Naruto gave him didn't use much chakra, so those should be fine. So he wasn't completely helpless. Still, he'd have to tell the others when he got back. They deserved to know, and he didn't want this to come out when they were in the middle of a fight. Half an hour later, Sasuke came back with 8 fish caught with a makeshift spear he'd made. Naruto started a fire while he set about making brine to salt the meat. Sakura, meanwhile, separated what the clones had brought back. Quite a few plants and mushrooms got tossed away, the pink-haired girl saying they'd either give them stomach problems or kill them soon enough. Their food was roasting as they sat around a fire. Naruto's clones had a perimeter, so they should be alerted to anything that came their way. All 3 of them eyed the cooking with anticipation as they waited. Sasuke sighed. Well, I guess now's as good a time as any, the Uchiha said. Drawing his teammates' attention, he pointed at the seal on his neck. This thing won't let me use jutsu. Anytime I try to use too much chakra, it tries to make me use it. What? Naruto exclaimed. Wait. Then Sakura began. I'm not helpless. He cut them off. I can still use taijutsu and Naruto's seals. Well, That was a relief still, this just got worse and worse. It pissed Naruto off that the bastard had waltzed in their village and as good as branded his friend, and then he left without so much as a by your leave, and what he did to those genin from his own village. Orochimaru saw people as nothing but pawns that he could throw away or do whatever he wanted with. Whenever he wanted, it made him sick. They both calmed down. Naruto grimaced and crossed his arms. We need to get to the proctors. Maybe we can get them or Kakashi-sensei to do something about it before the next test. I mean, they're going to have to talk to us anyway, since we ran into Orochimaru. Sasuke and Sakura nodded. They should. I mean, that's not exactly part of the exams. The pink-haired Kunoichi said. How are you holding up? Sakura. Naruto asked. I'm fine, I'm getting better. I think I can stand up straight without a problem now, just tired and hungry. Sakura replied. I didn't do much aside from watching Sasuke all night. She then looked at him curiously. What about you? Same, I didn't really run into any trouble. Naruto shrugged, and then he smiled. I did meet this girl, though. Sakura raised a brow. A girl? He nodded. Yeah, this green-haired girl from Taki named Fu. Orochimaru had some other snakes waiting for me, and she jumped in to help. She said she wanted to be friends, and then we went our separate ways. I'd suspect that was a trap, but it doesn't look like this girl tried to follow you, Sasuke observed. We said we'd meet up at the tower. I hope so. Fu seemed like a lot of fun. He then chuckled. She rode on one of the snakes like it was a bull trying to throw her off. Sakura looked at him dully. Seriously, why am I reminded of a certain someone right now? Naruto just laughed and rubbed the back of his head. A day later, and the three genin of Team 7 were well rested with full bellies. Sakura had mostly recovered from her fight with the Oto genin, and Sasuke was as good as he would get until they got someone to look at that seal. It was time to get a move on and hopefully finish this test so they could get out of this forest. As they leaped through the trees, moving towards the tower, Sakura turned to Naruto. Have your clones found anyone yet? Naruto shook his head. Doesn't look like it. We should keep heading toward the tower, Sasuke said. If we're lucky, we'll find a team along the way. If not, we can set up an ambush that's sure to net us both. Scroll sounds good. They were interrupted by a roar coming from the forest floor. All three turned to look in that direction, but Sasuke was the first to move, with Naruto following close behind. It sounded like something big had cornered something. They moved down the tree until they were running along the trunk, and they spied it. It was a giant bear, and it had cornered a red-headed girl with a Kusa forehead protector by some tree trunk. She wore a mesh shirt and stockings, a purple skirt, a light brown short-sleeved jacket with an orange stripe going across the chest, and black sandals. She'd fallen prone on her stomach, helpless. Sasuke was the closest, and so he launched himself at the beast, proving he was, in fact, far from helpless. He flipped through the air and brought his leg down on the bear's head in a move Naruto recognized from their spars. Lion's barrage. He flipped 2 more times, slamming his foot into the beast's head twice more. The third hit knocked the oversized bear out cold, and it fell flat on the ground. Sasuke stood triumphantly on its head, looking down at the girl, who stared up at him. An earth scroll, like ours? Sasuke asked. Naruto wasn't sure he approved of him, thinking of the test right now, but hey, he did save the girl's life. Besides, they really needed to get out of the forest and talk to the old man. He and Sakura jumped down and landed by the Uchiha's side. Is she alright? Naruto asked. The girl jolted at his voice and quickly scrambled for, oh, she had glasses. She looks like it. I don't see any cuts or scratches. Sakura noted. We're in a hurry if the girl's okay. Then let's. Sasuke began, only for the girl to cut him off. Wait, the girl cried out. All three of them looked to her to see she was scrambling to her feet, looking at them desperately. Please, wait, is something wrong? Naruto asked, a bit worried about the expression on her face. She looked like she was terrified of something. You're Naruto Uzumaki, right? Naruto blinked and raised a brow. Yeah, why? I'm Karen Uzumaki. Please, you have to help me, she cried, distress clear in her voice. What? Both of his teammates froze as they all looked down at the girl with wide-eyed shock. His mind reeled as he realized who she was, that this girl could be part of his long-lost family. Karen looked up from her place on the ground and still couldn't believe it. There, beside the boy who saved her, was Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who'd so brazenly announced himself to all the genin, who had blown away all the fears of the genin at the end of the first test. Her distant cousin, part of her, had wanted to reach out to him then and there, but she'd known there was no hope there. Her teammates would never have let her say anything, if they even let them talk at all. After so many years in Kusa, she had all but given up and accepted her lot in life. But now, there was a spark where there had only been emptiness before, brought about by the kindness Karen had received from the black-haired boy, the first act of kindness she'd received since she set foot in Kusa, and by the presence of her cousin. She didn't know him yet, but she was practically begging fate that their relation would mean something. This was the first time she'd felt any sense of hope in years. She hadn't felt any since the day she'd seen her mother lying on a hospital bed, Covered by a white sheet, Naruto was the first to recover and leaped down, standing in front of her. Really, you're from my clan? She nodded. Please help me with what's wrong? Can't your team? He started, but she shook her head violently. No, they can't, they're part of the problem, she yelled. She then became timid, afraid of rejection, fearful that this last tether of hope would be severed. Please hear me out. Naruto frowned and crossed his arms. He briefly glanced around before looking like he was thinking hard. Right, they were in the middle of a life or death exam. This probably looked kinda sketchy. She knew her teammates wouldn't have gotten cornered that easily. Please, after a moment, he nodded. All right, let's hear. Her heart soared. Maybe this nightmare would end. Can we move? I don't want my team to find us. Sounds like a good idea to me, the blonde replied with a shrug. Are you sure about this? The pink-haired girl asked skeptically. This could be a trap. If it is, we'll deal with it, Naruto replied firmly. Let's see what she has to say. Let's go. Sakura, the coal-eyed boy, said. He's made up his mind. You know as well as I do that once he's decided on something, there's no talking him out of it. Sakura nodded to him and turned to Karen. What direction did your team go? And she pointed in the opposite direction of the tower. Good. We were heading the other way anyway. Still, let's veer off a bit, just in case. They traveled in silence for 10 minutes, Naruto taking point, Sasuke to one side while Sakura was behind her while she was in the center, probably in case she tried anything. Not that she would. Hell, she couldn't even if she wanted to. There was a reason her teammates had left her behind. Thoughts flew through Karen's mind as she looked to the two boys. The one who had saved her life, and her cousin, who she hoped would do so a second time. She remembered everything that had happened to her in Kusa and looked to her cousin, praying that he would help her. Finally, the black-haired boy pointed down the other gen and nodded. They were soon standing within the roots of one of the giant trees of the forest. Okay, what's the trouble? Karen, Naruto asked, and Karen was struck, not for the first time. As she looked at him, she could sense chakra. It wasn't too uncommon, from what her mother said, but in some members of their clan, a powerful version of the ability manifested. It wasn't just the range that was impressive, but the accuracy. At least it would be once she honed it more. Right now, one unique power of hers was the limited ability to read the hearts of those in close range. Chakra felt warm the more kind a person was, and colder the crueler or more evil they were. Naruto's chakra was so warm. How much do you know about our clan? Karen asked. Naruto seemed confused by the question, but he answered, not much. He then looked a bit sad. I'm an orphan, and no one ever talked to me about it. Honestly, I only recently found out we were a clan. Karen was surprised. From what her mother had told her about their relationship to Konoha, she thought he'd know a lot more, but something else stood out to her. So, you're alone too? Not anymore, Naruto replied. I've got my team and some other people close to me, but what about you? Karen looked away for a moment, taking a breath as she gathered her thoughts, steeled herself from the emotions she knew would follow, and prepared to explain everything. Well, our clan has 5 abilities my mother explained to me before she passed. Aside from our vitality and our sealing techniques, there's the power to create chakra chains, a rare sensory skill that I inherited, and one other ability that I have. Naruto seemed to sense that this was difficult for her and looked concerned. What is it? We can use our vitality to heal others by having them bite us. Our vitality is channeled into them. Through the bite it can heal fatal wounds in moments. Naruto's eyebrows shot up, and his teammates seemed just as surprised. My mother and we originally lived in a small farming that got attacked. She brought us to Kusa and offered to use that ability to heal their people if they let us live there. She choked up a bit. They drained my mother day in and day out until they sucked her dry, and then she closed her eyes and looked away as she reached to her collar and pulled it down. She heard 2 gasps ring out as they saw the close to a dozen bite marks there alone. The only reason they even brought me here was so my team could use me to keep up their strength. When she opened her eyes, her vision a bit blurry, Naruto was staring in shock. Sakura looked horrified while the black-haired boy had moved past that and looked cold and angry. Please, I know they'll kill me too if I go back. You have to get me out of Kusa now. Anger began to filter into Naruto's face. His hands clenched at his side as his face twisted, teeth grit in rage. Then the expression dropped. He stepped forward, placing his hands on her shoulders before pulling her into a hug. Don't worry, I'm not letting you go back there. I don't care what I have to do. I will help you. She teared up and wrapped her arms around him as she sobbed into his shoulder. Once Karen calmed down, she was left sitting against the roots while Team 7 stood together, discussing what they just heard. Naruto, I understand that you want to help her, especially if she's actually your cousin, but what do you think we can do for her? Sakura asked before glancing back at Karen. Don't get me wrong, if that story's true then I want to help her too, but what are 3 genin going to do? Help her go rogue ninja? But it's not just 3 genin, Naruto pointed out with a smile. Come on, give me some credit. I have thought this through kinda. It's not like I walked up to her without a backup plan in mind, Naruto said. glancing up at a bird silently gazing down at them as it groomed itself. "We need to talk to old man Okage. If anyone can help her, it's him. And he's probably already going to talk to us. Thanks to Orochimaru, we just have to get to the tower soon enough for him to get to us. And we were already going to do that so someone could take a look at that seal on Sasuke." Knowing Lord Third, he definitely want to do something about this. Sasuke assessed with a nod, crossing his arms. "And he's right, they'll probably want to know about what happened. If not the Hokage, then some other higher up. And we can pass what we know about Karen up to them." He then looked to Naruto. "But what if he won't, or can't help?" Naruto grimaced and rubbed the back of his head. "I'll cross that bridge if we come to it." Sasuke sighed. "Try not to make promises you can't keep." He then shrugged. "Anyway, it's worth a shot." Sakura nodded in agreement and Naruto smiled. "Thanks, you guys." The trio rejoined Karen, who looked to them with hope. "Okay, the first thing we need to do is get to the tower. But we're still one scroll short." The redhead nodded. "What do you want me to do?" Naruto shrugged. "Well, if there's anything you can do to help, we'd appreciate it." Karen seemed to shrink away. "I can't do much. I can sense chakra, but I'm not really good at pinpointing locations right now. We can handle that. In the meantime, use the transformation jutsu in case your team comes looking for you," Sakura told her, only for Karen to flinch. "I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" Naruto asked, raising a brow. "Even he could pull that technique off back when he was at the academy. Hell, his original jutsu had been based on it." "I don't know how." Sakura grimaced before face palming. "Oh boy, I see. They as good as killed your mother and used you as a walking elixir. Of course, they wouldn't teach you enough to run away." She then looked at her dully. "Let me guess, they only taught you enough to keep up with them so you wouldn't slow them down, didn't they?" Karen flinched again, curling into herself a bit. "Did they even teach you how to fight?" "Not really." Sasuke sighed. "I wondered how you got cornered by that bear so easily." "Bastards," Naruto cursed under his breath. "And they sent her to these exams with so little training. He'd wonder if they were trying to get her killed. But after the whole walking elixir thing, this shouldn't be a surprise." "All right, we can take care of that. You just stay out of sight when we find a team, okay?" Karen nodded. They resumed moving toward the tower, with one extra among them. Naruto glanced back at Karen, who still seemed troubled. After telling them her story, he wanted to talk to her, to give her comforting words, or just speak with the first blood relative he'd ever met. But what was he supposed to say after that? He couldn't think of anything that wasn't either lame or wouldn't go back to that story. Instead, they simply traveled in silence. It was a bit over half an hour later that a rush of memories flowed into Naruto's mind. There was a trio of genin traveling towards the tower, keeping low to the ground, and they weren't too far from where they were right now. He didn't know which of them had their scroll, but if they were heading in their direction, then there was a good chance they either had both scrolls or had the same idea they did. Even then, there was a 50-50 shot they had what they need. This could be it. He held up his hand, gesturing for the rest of his team to stop. They landed on a branch and looked around, spotting a tree with a hollow space near the bottom. He turned to his apparent cousin and pointed to the empty space. "Hey, Karen, we're going to go hunting for a scroll hideout down there." "Okay." Karen nodded. "Okay." They watched as she jumped down to the forest floor. "Found someone?" Sasuke asked. Naruto gestured to the right with his head. "Yeah, there's a group heading towards the tower. If we move now, we can set up an ambush." His teammates nodded, and they headed out. 3 genin from AIM traveled as blurs across the forest floor. All 3 wore blue outfits with cloaks and had large umbrellas on their backs. Wherever they were going, they seemed to be trying to keep quiet, darting beneath the trees wherever possible. Shame they'd already been spotted. As they emerged from the shadow of a root system, a blinding light erupted ahead of them. The 3 came to a stop, crying out in pain and shielding their faces as the light burned their eyes. "Crap! Ambush!" one of them called out before he suddenly let out a cry of shock. Sakura must have done her part. "Daiki!" one of the others called out, and now it was his turn. He made a hand sign and inhaled deeply, needing the air in his lungs. Wind style, air bullets. A volley of balls of air flew from his mouth towards the 2 AIM genin. They dodged as the light disappeared, revealing their friend had been buried up to his neck in the ground. The pair leaped backward, only for a few stones behind one of the genin to burst into smoke, revealing 2 of Naruto's clones. They shot towards the nearest genin while he was still in midair. He twisted his body in an attempt to dodge the impending attack, but wasn't nearly fast enough. One of the clones drove his fist into one of his kidneys. The other slipped beneath him and struck him in the jaw with a kick. One last air bullet from the real Naruto slammed into his chest, driving him into the tree behind them. The remaining genin grit his teeth. "Damn it!" Sakura burst from the ground, forming a hand seal earth style. Earth flow spears. The final genin jumped into the air as a trail of stone spears moved ever closer towards him. Right where they wanted him. He gasped out as a trio of shuriken flew out from behind him, flying past him before changing course. Wires glinting in the light, they wrapped around him and tightened, pulling him towards a nearby tree and binding him there. As they dug into his skin, Naruto looked around and saw no sign that they were getting up. Looks like we got them, Sakura called out. Naruto grinned as he jumped down. Good work, guys, now, let's see if they got what we need. Sakura gestured to the buried genin as Sasuke stepped out from his hiding place. Well, it's not on him. They ultimately found what they were looking for on Sasuke's target. Naruto let out a whoop as he held up the beige scroll they'd been hoping to see. Great, now we can get out of this forest, Sakura said. Putting her hands together, he didn't blame her. Between Orochimaru, that seal, and their much-needed talk with their leader, he was eager to get out of here too. Naruto turned to the bound genin. No hard feelings, right guys? We didn't make the rules here. The genin seemed to know he was beaten and turned away. Just take it and go. It looked like things were finally going their way again after they got the scroll. The three had left the three-aim genin where they caught them and returned to Karen's hidey hole, where they found her curled up against one of the roots with the redhead in tow. The trio made their way to the tower. It took a few hours, but they made it without any more complications. Karen stood at the entrance as the three genin of Team 7 stepped inside one of the rooms and looked around. There's no one here, Naruto said. Sakura noticed something and pointed to above them. Hey, look up there. The genin looked up to see a poster on the far wall. After reading it for a moment, she turned to her teammates. I think it's telling us to open the scrolls. The three exchanged looks and nodded. Naruto pulled out the two scrolls and handed one to Sakura. They looked at them with trepidation, unsure of what was unfold. After a moment, they unfurled them at the same time. They never had a chance to read what was written on them because the moment they'd been opened up, smoke began to rise from them. It's a summoning jutsu. Get back, Sasuke said, and Naruto and Sakura immediately dropped the scrolls and leaped backward. A figure appeared within the smoke and the three genin tensed while Karen partly hid behind the doorframe. Slowly, the smoke cleared to reveal Naruto's eyes widened before he smiled widely. Iruka-sensei, the scarred Chunin, smiled. Hey, Naruto, good to see you. He gave the three genin an appraising look. Looks like you had a rough time of it, but I'm glad you got here in good time. You don't know the half of it, Iruka-sensei, Naruto began before his eyes widened. He'd been so surprised to see Iruka that other things had slipped from his mind for a second. He looked at his former teacher urgently, and the man frowned as he picked up on it. Listen, you need to call Lord Hokage. Orochimaru is in the forest. What, Orochimaru? Iruka exclaimed, taking a step back. It was probably a mark of how serious he was that he had referred to him as Lord Hokage instead of old man or something. Naruto nodded. He attacked us on the first day. He put some weird seal on Sasuke's neck, Sakura added. Iruka looked between them, then to Sasuke, who nodded, placing a hand over the mark. Iruka closed his eyes and calmed himself. I see. I'll tell Lord Third immediately. He'll probably want to talk to you. And look at that seal. Can he do something about it? Sasuke asked. Using too much chakra seems to trigger it. Iruka nodded. If it's what I think it is, I believe so. I'm glad you're all right. And it was then he noticed Karen, who was still partly hiding behind the door. The redhead hesitated for a moment before stepping into the room. And who's this? A ninja from Kusa. She's not a part of that, Naruto explained with a shake of his head. That's a whole other situation that I wanted to talk to the old man about. He looked at the Chunin pleadingly. Just trust me, Iruka-sensei, she's in big trouble. Iruka held his gaze for a moment before looking back at the girl. After a moment, he nodded. I'm not so sure about this, but I guess there's no harm in bringing it up with Lord Hokage if he's coming here anyway. He then turned and walked to the door. Come with me. And with that, Iruka led them through the tower. Karen joined Team 7 behind the scarred Chunin, looking more than a little concerned. Who's Orochimaru and why did that have him so worried? Naruto frowned. Orochimaru's an S-ranked criminal who came from our village, so him suddenly showing up here is a pretty big deal, he explained. Karen looked at him in confusion. S-ranked, she questioned, and then shrugged. Well, if he's a criminal from Konoha, I guess I understand. Sakura sighed. They didn't tell you anything, did they? Bunch of she trailed off into a series of grumbles before putting her hands on her hips. S-rank basically means the shinobi is so powerful that fighting them is usually certain death, even for standard jonin in large numbers. Karen's eyes widened. And you fought him and got our asses kicked, Naruto replied. So, who is this girl anyway? Iruka asked, half turning to look at Naruto. Her name's Karen. It's a long story, like I said. I'm hoping the old man can help her out, Naruto replied, glancing at the girl. And why do you think we can help her if her village can't? Iruka questioned with a raised brow. Naruto scowled. Because her village is the problem. The scarred Chunin frowned at him, clearly not understanding, but in the end, he shrugged and closed his eyes. Well, I'll trust you on this one. Lord Hokage will sort it out one way or another. Iruka stopped at a pair of double doors and opened it for them. It was a large room with a table, a couch, and a desk against the far wall. All right, stay here until Lord Hokage arrives. And with that, he vanished in a burst of speed. So, I guess there's nothing else to do but sit tight until the old man gets here, Naruto said before turning to Karen. So, you mentioned you lived in a farming village. What kind of things did you like to do there? Well, I used to like reading the books. My mother got me the 4 genin. Were alone in the room for a few hours during that time. Naruto got to know his cousin Sakura had been happy to find that Karen was as much of a bookworm as she was, though she hadn't had much to read in the last few years or anything to be happy about, really. Apparently, she'd had to report to the hospital first thing in the morning in Kusa and spent the whole day there. He was really starting to hate Kusa. There hadn't been much else typical farming village stuff. Though Karen had liked to go exploring in the forest, they didn't pry much farther. They hadn't wanted to bring up the village's fate or her time in Kusa. Eventually, there came a knocking on the door. The 4 turned to it as it was opened by an ANBU member, who stood aside to allow a familiar figure to enter. Naruto couldn't help but return the smile the old man gave them. Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, I'm glad to see you well after your harrowing experience. Hey, old man Hokage. Naruto blinked as he registered that he wasn't the only familiar person who entered the room. Kakashi-sensei, they called you here too. Is it any surprise when my team is concerned? The silver-haired Jonin asked. Well, glad to see you weren't late this time. And Naruto trailed off as a man he didn't recognize entered, along with 2 more ANBU. He had long ash blonde hair reaching into his lower back, which he wore spiky on top and ending in a long ponytail, and light green eyes. He wore the standard flak jacket over a black outfit with handguards, a forehead protector, and a sleeveless red Haori. Inoichi, Sakura said, stepping forward, seeming confused by the man's presence. Sakura, long time no see. The man, Inoichi, greeted with a nod. So Sakura knew him and that name, and while it was a different shade of blonde, Sakura turned to him and Sasuke and confirmed what he was suspecting. This is Ino's dad, Inoichi Yamanaka. I called him here to help with the less urgent concern, the man known as the third god of shinobi said before turning his eyes to Karen, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. As I'm sure you can imagine, I was rather surprised to hear that you came here with a foreign shinobi in tow, claiming she was in some kind of danger, he said as he stepped forward with his hands behind his back. He gave her an appraising eye. I believe I have a suspicion as to this girl's identity, but can you confirm it for me? Naruto nodded and gestured towards the redhead. This is Karen Uzumaki. Kakashi's eye widened while Hiruzen nodded, looking at Naruto harder than he remembered in a long time. I see. I hope you didn't bring her here to plead her case, just because she's your apparent cousin. Naruto began to quickly wave his hands back and forward in front of him, looking vaguely panicked. No, of course not. I mean, that's not all. I wouldn't have brought her here if I didn't think she needed serious help. He turned to Karen, who seemed even more uncertain. Tell them. Karen nodded and stepped forward. Lord Hokage, yes. Young lady, I trust there's a good reason my genin have brought you to me. Yes, I begged them for help, Karen began and then explained her story. Hearing it still made Naruto's hackles raise, but he took a moment to look at the other occupants. He didn't glance at the ANBU. He knew he wouldn't see anything from them. Kakashi took it all in, seemingly as stoic as ever, but his gaze was as sharp as it was during his battle with Zabuza. Inoichi was scowling, the other blonde's hands clenched when Karen revealed the bite marks on her neck. As for old man Hokage, he stoically took it all in, his gaze still as hard as before, but Naruto suspected it was for a different reason now. When Karen's story ended, he sighed. Unfortunately, Kusa's distaste for outsiders is well known. It has brought them no end to conflicts in the past. This is about what I'd expect from them. You believe she's telling the truth? One of the ANBU asked. I believe her story is plausible. I know that the ability she described is indeed a rare Uzumaki trait, the third replied before he stepped to the side and looked at Inoichi. I suspected your abilities would be useful here when I heard of the girl. If you would, Inoichi, confirm her tale to the best of your abilities as you wish. It shouldn't be hard with a genin, Inoichi said as he stepped forward. Karen seemed uneasy as he approached. Just relax and stay still. I'm not going to hurt you, he said gently. Karen nodded. After a moment, Inoichi placed a hand on her head and closed his eyes. Karen jerked a second later, then seemed to relax to allow Inoichi to do whatever it was he was doing. What's he doing? Naruto asked. He's reading her mind, Kakashi-sensei said as he took a spot beside his genin. It's a rare skill, but of course, the Yamanaka clan excels at arts related to the mind and spirit. He's likely the most proficient with this ability in all of Konoha. Whoa, Naruto uttered in awe. He hadn't known that was possible. When Inoichi took his hand away, he looked disgusted. He turned to their leader with a glare. Unless someone altered her memories, she's telling the truth, the whole thing, he said before he cursed and stepped away from her. I see, Hiruzen said, and he looked at the girl more softly than he had before. I'm sorry about your mother and that you had to endure such treatment. Thank you, Karen replied, Looking up at the elder shinobi more hopefully, will you help me? The third nodded. I believe it would not be out of the question to offer you asylum, he said before he cupped his chin, although I imagine Kusa will raise a fuss and it will reflect poorly on Konoha to seemingly poach another village's talent. We'll need to come up with something. I don't believe that will be a problem, Lord Hokage, Inoichi spoke up. Frowning deeply, they barely trained this girl. She spent pretty much all her time in the hospital being used to treat any injured shinobi. I wouldn't be surprised if your grandson could outfight her. She wouldn't stand a chance against the forest's hazards alone. You don't know the half of it, Naruto cut in, furious as he recalled how they met as cousins. She was about to get killed by a bear when we found her. We only got to her because we decided to look into what was going on. When he heard the thing roar, then they have every reason to assume her dead and thus aren't likely to complain unless she makes a name for herself. Hiruzen mused before nodded. Very well, you may find shelter here in Konoha. Karen's face lit up. It was the first time since meeting her Naruto had seen her happy. She bowed deeply. Thank you, Lord Hokage. She then turned to him before he could say anything. She ran over and threw her arms around him. And thank you for listening, he returned the embrace. Don't mention it, Karen. I wasn't about to leave you to die like that for a moment. No one said anything before. Lord Hokage coughed. While I would like nothing more than to leave you to get to know one another, there are procedures to follow in these circumstances. He looked at Karen. You will be going with Inoichi, rest assured. We will not demand that you use your power for us, though we would welcome whenever you chose to use it to help another. Karen nodded as Inoichi stepped forward. Sorry, but it's best we get started as soon as possible. Karen looked as disappointed as he did, but gave in. She walked over to the blonde man before giving them one last look. Thank you again for saving me. She then looked at Sasuke twice. It's nothing, none of us would stand aside and watch someone die like that. I just got there first, Sasuke said with a small smile, and she blushed. Oh, great, well, at least she had more of a reason to have a crush on him than Sakura, Ino, and all his fangirls back in the academy. Did save her life. He watched as the now ex-Kusa Kunoichi left with Inoichi, one of the ANBU trailing behind them as they disappeared behind the closing doors. His gaze lingered there for a few seconds. I once told you all that shinobi who break the rules are scum, but those who abandon their friends are worse than scum, Kakashi spoke up, drawing his attention. He, too, was staring at the door before he looked at his students. That I have no words for what's going to happen to her, Naruto asked. Well, as I said, there are protocols to follow. Besides, as unlikely as it is possible that the girl's memories have been altered, the third Hokage stated as he looked down at Naruto. She'll be kept in isolation in these circumstances. She'll be treated well but effectively under house arrest during this time. We will do all we can to examine her for any signs that she may be a spy or a threat to the village. We'll also give her a DNA test to confirm she is a member of the Uzamaki clan. If all checks out and we find no cause for concern, she'll be inducted into the village in a month or so. Naruto was silent for a moment, smiling at the thought of getting to know a relative, of having a family. No, that wasn't right. Team 7, the third Hokage, Iruka, Tucci, and Ayam were his family. He wasn't gaining one, he was adding to it. The third Hokage smiled down at him for a moment, letting him bask in that thought before his expression hardened a bit. Although, I hope you didn't take her story at face value, especially in these circumstances. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Well, I wanted to believe her, he replied, but it's not like I walked into it totally defenseless. I had some shadow clones disguised as birds following us before we even met her. They would have jumped in if she tried anything. The third nodded. Well, it's good that you had a backup plan. He then looked at the three genin seriously, looking like the strong leader he was now. Onto the issue that brought me here. Describe your encounter with my wayward student. And so they did. And when the three genin finished relaying the tale, the third had moved them to one of the rooms meant for the genin. He now stood over Sasuke and examined the seal while the Uchiha sat on one of the beds. Kakashi had been dismissed, being assured that the third would personally handle it. Definitely one of his curse marks. I see. Curse mark, it's a type of cursed seal Orochimaru invented. Hiruzen explained. Cursed seals are different from traditional sealing jutsu. They are meant to control people, usually by manipulating thoughts or paralyzing or even killing the bearer on command, or if they break some taboo established by the seal's creator. Orochimaru's seal, however, is insidious. It grants one power but corrupts their mentality the more they use it, gradually making them more like him. Ultimately, they join him willingly, granting him a powerful and loyal servant. Naruto clenched his fists in anger while Sakura looked concerned, her hands clasping together before her chest. The third continued, fortunately, it will go dormant if it goes unused for long enough, and it can be sealed. He then looked from one genin to the other. I should warn you, Orochimaru's subordinate Dosu was right. Orochimaru has threatened to destroy Konoha if the exams are interrupted. That Got exclaims of shock from Naruto and Sakura and a widening of the eyes from Sasuke for that reason. We will continue with the exams. We'll prepare for the worst while hoping that Sasuke was his only objective in coming here. How do you know so much about the cursed mark? Gramps, Naruto asked after a pause. There is a shinobi in Konoha who was marked with this same seal before Orochimaru left the village. I'll say no more. It is not my story to tell, Hiruzen said before turning to the Uchiha heir. Sasuke, I'm going to restrain the cursed mark. It will not be easy on you, though it won't be as strenuous as having it placed on you in the first place. Even so, you can expect to be out the rest of the day. Are you prepared? Sasuke nodded and braced himself. The third nodded very well. He brought his hand to his mouth and bit into his thumb, drawing blood, and then placed it on the nape of Sasuke's neck, just below the curse mark 4 corners restraining seal. And then Sasuke cried out in pain as the blood flowed up his skin and formed a circle around the curse mark 4 points in what was meant to represent the cardinal directions. When it was over, Sasuke slumped forward. Sakura cried as she and Naruto ran forward to catch him. Finding he had already lost consciousness, Sasuke will be fine, Hiruzen said as he put his hands behind his back. Team 10 will be informed that they are not to speak a word of Orochimaru's involvement in the exams. Should they arrive, for now, you are free to roam the tower. As is Sasuke once he wakes up. The third walked to the door as Sakura laid Sasuke down. Take the remaining time to relax and unwind. I hope the rest of your trials here will be more conventional. After taking the time to use their room's bathroom to clean up a bit, Naruto took to exploring the tower. As Sakura stayed in their room and watched over Sasuke, he found there wasn't much to see. There was a cafeteria, but aside from that, it looked like it was all meeting rooms and bedrooms. Geez, I might just go back to the room and practice my sealing jutsu, Naruto thought to himself as he put his hands in his pockets. As he looked out a nearby window, he was high enough to be above even the massive trees of the forest. He briefly wondered what kind of creatures wander the place, but it wasn't like he could see anything from here. He shrugged and kept walking. It was then that he heard footsteps approaching from around the nearby corner. Man, I am so bored. Isn't there anything to do here? A familiar voice groaned. Naruto smiled as he recognized it a second later. For rounded the corner, slumped forward and looking more than a little down. She blinked when she saw him before her face lit up. Naruto, you made it. He waved at her. Hey, Fu, good to see you. The green-haired girl crossed the distance between them in a single bound, laughing as she took a spot in front of him, her face inches from his. I'm so glad you're here. Maybe now we can have some fun. Naruto scratching his cheek. Geez, you act you've been cooped up here by yourself. Don't you have your team with you? Fu deflated at that and slumped forward again. She looked away and rubbed the back of her head. Yeah, but we're not exactly friends. Our team was kinda put together at the last minute for the exams. I asked if they wanted to hang out, but they both wanted to do their own thing, she began, and everyone else I met here is so caught up in the exams that they don't want to be around someone from another village. So she pretty much had been on her own then. Naruto gave her a grin and put his hands behind his head. Well, I'm game. What have you got in mind? Fu brightened up again. How about we play cards or backgammon? Naruto raised a brow at her. Did you bring cards or a backgammon table? Because I sure didn't. Damn it, Fu cursed under her breath. Then how about we take a bath together? Naruto's face went red. That's not something you do with someone you just met, or if they're a boy and you're a girl. Really, I know I've heard that friends do stuff like that, Fu replied with a frown, crossing her arms and looking like she was thinking hard. Naruto got the feeling that Fu didn't have many friends if she thought that was normal. Trust me, it isn't. Fu seemed to fall into depression. Then what are we going to do? Wander the halls together? Naruto cupped his chin and thought she was right. This place was boring and they had 2 whole days left to kill. He racked his brain for ways to pass the time before the favorite hobby of a particularly lazy member of the Nara clan entered his mind. We could go cloud watching. I do plenty of that back in Taki. It's not really fun, Fu replied with a shake of her head. Naruto thought for a moment before an idea sparked in his mind. Then let's make a competition out of it. Fu tilted her head to the side. Whoever spots the coolest shapes wins, Naruto said, raising a fist in challenge. Fu didn't look impressed. She sighed as she shrugged her shoulders and put her hands on her hips. I don't know, we're still just watching clouds go by. Look at that one, Fu exclaimed as she sat up, pointing at the sky. It looks like a flock of birds taking off. Oh, yeah, I see it, Naruto said as he looked where she was. She was right. It really did look like 3 birds in formation, their wings raised mid-flap. Fu fell onto her back and closed her eyes, smiling with confidence as she laid on the tower's roof. Heh, try and top that. Naruto got her attention by poking her in the shoulder. When she looked at him, he gave her a cheeky grin and pointed. She followed his finger and sat up, her eyes bugging out. He was pointing at a cloud that looked like a dragon in the middle of a rampage, the bipedal kind, its head and torso poking out from behind a building it could knock down at any moment. He made a victory sign. Looks like I win again, Fu growled, burying her hands in her mint green hair before turning to Naruto. Just you wait, the next round's mine. She then smiled and giggled. You know, this is actually a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm surprised too. He then raised himself up, propping one arm on his knee, looked at her with a smile. Hey, how about I show you around the village? Once we're out of this tower, I'll show you all the sights and the best restaurant in Konoha's face lit up with excitement. She made a joyous exclamation as she turned to face him fully, leaning towards him and placing both hands on the roof. I'd love that. I can't wait